Costas, I'm interested. When a company's got a product offering, a variety of product offerings, and they want to make sure they stay relevant, they're looking at these incremental changes. There are so many variables, tweaks in the product, tweaks in the positioning, tweaks in the pricing, whatever it is. Where do they start? How do they know where to start as a business?
That's a good question. Probably very difficult to answer precisely. And maybe that's one of the misleading things, that people want the precise answer in order to get started. My guess is it's probably driven to a degree by culture. And at least I know of the companies we work with who are comfortable with incremental innovation, who have a system for it. They will default almost along a couple of dimensions. So for one, it may be always around claims on pack, for example. That's how they just bring new news to their consumers. So new claim means probably also something new to talk about in that new claim, which may mean a new technology, for example, or something new done in packaging. But it's always led by a new claim. Whereas for others, the starting point may actually not be the claim which is on packaging, but it may be that they know every year we just want a tweak to the actual product inside. We just want to change the formula. We know there's whatever we do, we have to update the formula in some way which makes it more relevant. So then they start there. The key then is, of course, once you have almost like a default position to start from, is what you do next. And I guess that differs a little bit by, well, at least by what we see. Often there is then some kind of research project being ignited, which can maybe overdo it a little, because you typically can't research your way towards innovation. What you can do through research is see, okay, so how have my current consumers maybe evolved new interests, new needs, or maybe are there new trends we should be playing into, which will then inform how to indeed make that little change I just mentioned. So how can a particular new need we see amongst our target trigger a new benefit we might be able to provide, which then leads to a new claim or a new technology. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about is about data. Yeah. So we live in a world that's becoming increasingly data-driven, and of course, analysing data and looking at correlations in marketplaces and other things can play an important part. You know, you think people like Amazon, who now get a third of all their orders from looking at recommendations, come from data-led recommendations from correlations. So to what extent do you think data should be playing a role in innovation, and to what extent, in your experience, are companies referring to data to sort of give themselves an eye into where they should be going next?
A very wise man once said to me, I've been measuring my penis for 30 years and I still can't control it. So there is a lot being measured for the sake of measuring. And I think there are two different types of data in my experience. One is the data which comes by observing. And you could say an environment like Amazon, just tracking what happens on their sites. And you're basically tracking stuff that actually happens. The other, you could say, source of relatively big data is just doing lots of surveys. That's a very different type of data, because surveys are completely dependent on basically the people who fill them in. And you probably also know the people who actually fill in surveys are in no way representative of what actually happens. And therefore, you could say the data is already flawed before you do any work with it. Again, looking at innovation, and maybe in the context of incremental innovation, working with lots of data has probably its most value. I'm personally not really a data person, definitely not a big data person, because the problem is, it's like, well, actually, to bring Mr. Ford back, people will just ask for faster horses. When you're looking for new things to do, if it's only incremental, it'll kind of work. Basically going out to see what people are doing and how they, or what they're asking for. If you want a little more dramatic innovations, it's basically going to be probably 1 or 2 interesting clues, maybe 3 or 4, but not 50 or 60,000 clues. And then it's much more the responsibility of the smartness of the person tasked with innovating, of picking out the right bits of information to make up their mind on, well, what's really the insight here, or what is really the opportunity for us as a business to go after, rather than just, say, hogging lots of data and hoping you can find a pattern. Because the misleading thing about data, particularly if there's a lot of it, you will always find a pattern. You can always, in hindsight, prove that whatever happened was already there waiting for you in the data set, and you just happen to have not seen it. And if anything, there is an interesting paradox. The more, say, data you gather, the higher the likelihood there will be conflicting data in there, rather than it all pointing down one particular direction. I mean, if it were easy, everyone would be doing that. And of course, everyone would be using big data to come up with the most fantastic innovations. It's not happening for that simple reason. The more data you have, the more likely it is it will conflict. And also, if you have a hunch on a particular, well, let's say need, motivation, opportunity, or whatever, if you just collect enough data, you'll find the answer right there. I mean, it's always in hindsight in that sense. It's maybe not the optimist answer you were hoping for, but I think it's an area you need to tread carefully. Again, if it's about small tweaks to your products, to your offering, to your positioning, to whatever, then indeed you can use you could say the nudges data will reveal, sort of the little movements in what's happening in the market. But if it's a slightly more dramatic innovation you think is necessary, then you probably need to dive deeper into, let's say, a more qualitative type input, which you really go into depth on what is really happening, rather than just putting big numbers together in a vat.